Ah, you came, Alex. It was a celebration for my close friend and colleague's promotion. On this happy day, our elitist boss, Steve, decided to spoil the mood. Noticing there wasn't a seat for me, my colleagues tried to make space, but Steve laughed. Isn't it great, Alex? No seat for the incompetent. His outrageously rude behavior pushed me to my limit. All right. Let's all leave then. Let's do that. Agreeing with me, everyone started packing up, leaving only Steve behind. Steve, who was panicking, still didn't know about my true identity. My name is Alex, 40 years old. I came back from my remote assignment today to celebrate my friend and colleague, Mike's, promotion. Mike and I joined the company right after graduating from college, and we both shared a passion for futsal, so we became close friends. He's the one I shared my dreams with over a beer after work. I believe someone like you should be the one to lead and reform the organization. If one of us were to move up, it should definitely be you. Mike would always say this when he got drunk. I would just laugh it off, but Mike was quite serious. Alright then, let's compete to see who gets a position first before aiming for the president's chair. We worked hard, driven by this friendly rivalry. Neither Mike nor I got married. Instead, we focused on our careers, taking on different assignments to steadily build our careers. Mike, who was good at engaging others without making enemies, was entrusted with important projects by the company. He successfully delivered, bringing significant profits to the company. As a result, the president, Mr. Jones, announced Mike's promotion to the youngest department head. There was some unrest among the bosses in the company, with some saying it was too early due to his age. What are you talking about? Those who are young and talented and contribute to the company should naturally be given appropriate positions. If we can't utilize young talent and make this a company where they want to work hard, we won't survive in the future. Mr. Jones' argument was logical, and no one argued after that. Mike told me this with a laugh. It was good to see that Mr. Jones has some guts. You don't often get to meet him even when you work here. That's true. But Mr. Jones is a passionate person. Congratulations on your promotion to department head. I'll work hard not to fall behind. You'll get there soon, I'm sure of it. Not sure about that. Steve hates me, so it might be difficult. Steve hates anyone who threatens his position or criticizes his way of doing things. Steve is a 55-year-old man who is nothing but a nuisance. We once worked on a project together with a few others, but Steve's constant nagging and criticism significantly lowered the team's morale. Your proposal is unrealistic as usual. You should think of something more practical. He would dismiss ideas like this, and he was even harsher on younger colleagues. Maybe you don't understand the importance of this project because you're still young. How about moving to a project that's more suited to your level? He said this to a young but capable woman named Natalie, whom I had personally recruited from another team, and it made me furious. With such an attitude, it's no wonder we couldn't get good results. So, I once voiced my concerns to Steve. With all due respect, Steve, your comments lower everyone's morale. I'm not asking for you to be friendly, it's work after all. But could you please be more mindful of your words to foster better teamwork? I thought I was being quite polite. But it didn't get through to Steve at all. Back in the day, this was normal. Feeling frustrated but determined to prove oneself is important, don't you think? You might want to seem like a nice guy by criticizing me, but a truly competent person needs the courage to be disliked. My stress levels skyrocketed after hearing this. I realized that Steve was stuck in outdated notions of leadership and morality. His inappropriate comments and treatment of Natalie were particularly noticeable. But I couldn't just give up there. But, Steve, times have changed. Steve interrupted me. There's no need to adapt to the times. Aren't we all being too soft on the young generation? When I was young, we didn't get any consideration from our bosses, but we still worked hard. I'm done. I quickly gave up on Steve and ran around trying to cushion the blow for everyone else. Steve would throw insults and impossible tasks at me. Whenever it went too far, I didn't stay silent, which is why Steve disliked me. He never explicitly said he hated me, but his signature sarcasm made it clear. Alex, you and I just don't get along. Probably on a fundamental level. If it were up to me, I wouldn't want to work with you. I'd like to meet someone who could take that comment positively. I could only get through it with a half-hearted smile. Those times were tough, and my stomach often hurt, but the project ended successfully, so I considered it a win. Thank you, Alex. Without you, I would have left the project at the very beginning. I could finish it thanks to you. Seeing Natalie teary-eyed and appreciated me made me feel saved. After that, I was assigned to a different location and didn't see Steve again. This time, it turns out Steve was the one who organized Mike's promotion celebration. His ulterior motive of wanting to stay close to the rising star, Mike, was evident, and it left me feeling uneasy. Well, I'll graciously play the main role. It'll be nice to see everyone too. Someone trustworthy will handle the details, so it should be fine. I'm looking forward to it. Me too. We talk on the phone, but it's been a while since we've met in person. I'm looking forward to it. That was the conversation we had the day before the celebration. The venue was a well-known French restaurant inside a hotel. As I stepped into the hotel, I wondered if there was a wedding happening somewhere. Elegantly dressed women and sharply dressed men were walking around. Seeing the celebratory atmosphere everywhere lifted my spirits as I headed to the restaurant. The restaurant was enveloped in a vibrant atmosphere, making my heart dance. Looking around, I saw Mike and then heard Natalie call out to me. Long time no see, Alex. How have you been? Oh, Natalie. It's been a while. So you're here for the promotion celebration too? Yes. I was invited as well. Since our last project together, Mike has been very kind to me. That's great. Was it easy working with Mike? Natalie nodded yes enthusiastically. It was really easy. Of course, he said some strict things, but it's completely different from someone just being emotional. Logical feedback makes a huge difference in how you take it. Natalie's way of saying it made me laugh. Those times were tough. I'm sure we're both thinking of the same someone. Natalie laughed out loud at my comment. I think Natalie is around 26 years old. She's truly an incredibly talented person. I hope she continues to grow in our company. Oh, by the way, Alex, where's your seat? I hope it's close to mine. Her question made me pause. Was there a seat assignment? My invitation didn't mention one. Taking out my invitation, Natalie looked puzzled. Is that the invitation you received? It seems different from ours. Natalie showed me her invitation from her bag. They were similar but had different designs. Here's what the inside of ours looks like. Her invitation included a greeting, the date, and a seat number. Mine only had the greeting and date. Both of us were taken aback. Wait, does that mean I don't have a seat? Could that be? Let me check with Steve. Natalie stopped mid-sentence. Being smart, she probably had a thought occur to her. I had the same thought. Could it be that this was intentional? Natalie's face was filled with anger. I wanted to deny it, but that was likely impossible. Maybe, just maybe. I am disliked, after all. As we were talking, someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around. It was Mike. Alex. It's been a while since we last talked, but it's been even longer since we've met in person. Thanks for coming all the way from so far. Mike hugged me, and I patted his back in response. Where's your seat? I asked Steve to put you near mine. Given our recent conversation, I wasn't sure how to respond. Well, about that, the seat. My hesitant demeanor made Mike look puzzled. Sorry, Mike. It seems Alex doesn't have a seat. His invitation doesn't have a seat number, unlike ours. Taking the invitation Natalie handed over, Mike was surprised. Wait a minute, that's absurd. Alex, let me see your invitation. Handing my invitation to a flustered Mike, he compared the two and widened his eyes. What the hell is this? What's going on? I specifically told Steve to seat you near me. Where is Steve? Mike, holding both invitations, went off to find Steve. Natalie and I hurried after him. Steve. Where are you, Steve? Hearing Mike's voice, Steve popped his head out from among the guests. Mike? What's up? The star of the day is raising his voice. Mike strode over to Steve, holding up the 2 invitations in his face. Steve. What's the meaning of this? Why is Alex's invitation different and without a seat number? I clearly remember you agreeing to seat him near me. Despite Mike's words, Steve remained unfazed. Oh, Alex's seat. Yes, you did ask me to place Alex near you. But, I thought it over. Steve gulped down his beer and said something unbelievable. I decided Alex didn't need a seat. After all, he's incompetent. The lively venue fell silent at those words. Whether he didn't notice or simply didn't care. Steve continued cheerfully. There's no place for the incompetent, be it in the company or at a celebration. Don't you agree? Mike's face turned red with anger. What have you done? I can't believe this. I owe a lot to Alex. Without his advice and encouragement, I wouldn't have achieved these results. It was a mistake to rely on you, Steve. I'll ask the restaurant to prepare a seat right now. When Mike angrily spoke, a staff member, sensing the seriousness of the situation, approached us. Is there something wrong, sir? Sorry, it seems we made a mistake and there's one seat missing. Could you please prepare another seat for us? I understand, of course. We'll arrange it right away. Thank you, and I'm really sorry. No problem at all, please wait a moment. As the staff member smiled and was about to leave, Steve grabbed her arm to stop her. Sir, is there a problem? No need to set up another seat. Understandably, the staff member was confused. Receiving mixed requests to add and not add a seat. Steve, that's enough. Please prepare the seat. No need, I said. He's incompetent. We don't need a seat for the incompetent. Seeing Steve laughing boisterously in the confused faces of everyone around, I quietly spoke to Mike. I apologized to Mike, who just turned around. Mike, I'm sorry for ruining the mood at your celebration. Not at all, I'm the one who should apologize. I'm sorry you had to experience this. Don't worry about it, Mike. It's honestly a wonder that someone as competent as you is friends with someone as incompetent as Alex. No need for a seat for the incompetent, whether in the company or here. After being called incompetent so many times, I finally reached my limit. All right. Let's all leave, then. When I called out, voices rose from various corners. Let's do that. I'm leaving too. Even Mike, the star of the day, started packing up, leaving Steve stunned. Wait. What are you doing, Mike? If you leave, it won't work out. Today is your promotion celebration. Steve, clearly panicking, tried to stop Mike. No, if this is what the celebration looks like, I'd rather not. I believe I got this promotion thanks to the support of those around me. Especially Alex. I can't celebrate by disregarding someone who's helped me. Mike's words must have conveyed his seriousness. Steve's expression started to change rapidly. Wait, you can't be serious. Mike, are you really leaving? Everyone's leaving too? We're leaving. I'm leaving as well, excuse me. Everyone started saying their goodbyes and leaving the restaurant. Excuse me, Steve. Let's go, Alex. Hey. Wait a minute. Please, Mike. As Steve tried to stop us, a restaurant staff member intervened. Steve? I'm sorry, but could you please explain what's happening here? This is quite confusing for us as well. Wait. Let go of me. Ignoring Steve and the restaurant staff, Mike, Natalie, and I left the hotel. Outside the entrance, our colleagues were waiting for us. So, what do we do now? Thank you all for coming to celebrate. I'm really sorry about what happened. Standing beside Mike, I also apologized. I apologize too. I'm really sorry. As we both apologized, voices reassured us. It's definitely not your fault, Mike. It's Steve who's in the wrong. Yeah. It really ruined the mood. My dad's running a small restaurant that's open right now. Would you like to go? I might be biased, but the food is really good. really? I love small restaurants. It's not that I dislike French cuisine, but I prefer that kind of place. If it's open, I'd love to go. Great. I'll let my dad know we're coming. With a new destination decided, everyone began moving together, chatting cheerfully. Surrounded by colleagues, Mike looked genuinely happy. It seems that Mike is having a good time. Oh, I should call him manager now, right? Nah, he doesn't care much about titles. He'd be more upset if we suddenly started treating him differently. Really? Then I'll keep it as is. Do that. Steve really outdid himself today. Seriously. Not just me, he's done similar things to other female employees. Natalie grimaced at the thought. Her words made me stop in my tracks. Natalie, can you tell me more about that? On our way to the restaurant, Natalie shared more about Steve's misdeeds. Everything she mentioned was absolutely unacceptable, and I sighed heavily. For now, I shifted my focus back to celebrating Mike's promotion. The impromptu celebration for Mike's promotion at the other restaurant was a heartwarming and wonderful event. And on my way home, I made a phone call. Hello? It's me. Do you have a moment? I have something to discuss. The next day, I returned to my assignment and worked as usual. 6 months later, I finished my assignment and returned to the headquarters. On my first day back, Mike came to greet me. Hey, welcome back. Thanks, Mike. I'm honored you came to greet me. Oh, stop it. You're here to see Mr. Jones, right? So am I. Shall we go together? Sure thing. Let's go. Mike and I headed to the president's office together. Mike knocked on the door, and upon hearing come in, we entered together. Excuse us, Mr. Jones. I've brought Alex with me. Excuse us. We both entered the office and greeted. Ah, I see. Good job. Let's hear your report. Yes, sir. I reported on my assignment. I see. Well done. Thank you. After hearing my report, Mr. Jones made a phone call. As we sipped the coffee the secretary brought, we heard a knock in Steve's voice. Excuse me. Come in. Steve entered, looking surprised to see us. From what Mike told me, Steve had a tough time after we left the restaurant. The next day, he confronted Mike at work, asking why he left, but Mike calmly explained what Steve had done. Word spread within the company that the reason was Steve's failure to arrange a seat for me, making him feel quite isolated. So he stayed quiet for a while. You called for me, Mr. Jones? Yes, sorry for the trouble. Have a seat. Steve reluctantly sat down on the sofa. The reason I called you all here is about personnel changes. I've decided to step down as president. Though I still feel young. My daughter got married and I have a grandchild now. My wife wants to spend more time together. Oh, really? Mr. Jones, you still seem so young. I always thought you'd continue leading the company. Thank you. Well, I still feel young, but I think it's time. I see. Mr. Jones, thank you for everything. I won't forget your guidance. Steve stood and appreciated him. Mr. Jones smiled at him. Thank you. Now, about the new president. We've found the right person. Steve's face lit up with expectation. Who might that be? Asking who it was, Steve leaned forward, nostrils flaring with anticipation. Mike and I struggled to suppress our laughter at the sight. The new president will be Alex here. And Mike will be the vice president. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I will do my best to shoulder this responsibility. I'll do my best to support Alex. We stood, greeted Mr. Jones. Thank you both. I trust you with the company and our important clients. Mr. Jones shook our hands firmly. I glanced at Steve, who looked frozen in disbelief. I smiled warmly at him. Steve? Is something wrong? Are you okay? Steve finally responded to my question. What? How can he be the president? His final question was directed at Mr. Jones. With a gentle smile, Mr. Jones explained. Well, Alex is highly competent. The branch he was assigned to had a lot of old-fashioned issues, such as intimidating superiors and inappropriate behavior towards female employees. It's shameful for a company to still have such problems in this day and age. Don't you think? Steve, turning pale, responded to Mr. Jones with a series of yes and absolutely remarks. Well, that's all he could say. He probably recognized these behaviors as his own. So, I had Alex work on improving the environment there. It was tough because those kinds of people are usually very stubborn. But despite the time it took, he managed to make significant improvements, and we've received positive feedback from the younger employees. That's great to hear. Those young colleagues are very talented and will thrive in a more open environment. I smiled, thinking of the young team members from my assignment. I could imagine their surprise when they found out I was becoming the president, probably calling me in shock. From the flow of this conversation, you can probably guess why you are here. Steve was pale. He was sweating so much that I almost wanted to ask if it was midsummer. He wiped his sweat with a handkerchief, his eyes darting around nervously. I had Mr. Jones call you here to inform you of your consequences as the new president. I pulled out a thick file from my bag. It was a dossier of all the complaints and issues related to Steve. Seeing the bold investigation report on the cover, Steve must have been extremely anxious about its contents. What is that? Did you investigate my private life? Not your private life, but we gathered feedback from employees. I flipped open the report and began reading. Repeated personal questions. Do you have a boyfriend? What do you do when you get home? If you don't have a boyfriend, why don't we go for a drink? It was very unpleasant. Wow, that's really creepy. Mike interjected perfectly. Mr. Jones looked equally dismayed. When I made a careless mistake, he told me, maybe you're not cut out for this job. Have you thought about finding a job that suits you better? And when I asked questions about things I didn't understand, he would say, you don't even know that? I'm surprised you've managed to keep your job. Everyone makes careless mistakes, no one is perfect. Asking questions should be encouraged, Mike added. Incredible, Steve. You've never made a mistake? People seem to forget their own mistakes from when they were young. You made plenty of mistakes, and I remember covering for you often. Mr. Jones chimed in. Steve, now red with embarrassment, hung his head. No matter how many times I asked you to consult me first, you never did, Mr. Jones continued. Finally, Steve covered his face with his hands. That may be true, but... Mr. Jones shared many stories with me. Steve, if you can't change your attitude, there's no place for you in this company. As I stated this firmly, Steve turned even paler. He turned white, then red, and then blue. His changing complexion was so extreme that I began to worry about the strain on his heart. No way. Many employees look up to me. You can't just do this because you're the new president. Really? Do they? Mike's loud comment echoed more than he intended, and he quickly covered his mouth. Unfortunately, my investigation didn't find anyone who expressed such feelings, I said. Steve stood up, shouting. That's impossible. Those reports are fabricated. There are plenty of employees who admire and respect me. Not just one or two. Come on, Steve. As a superior, you're a pain to deal with. People won't tell you they dislike you because they'd face endless nagging. So they stay silent. No way. Even Natalie said she respected me. Hearing Natalie's name, I flipped through the report. Natalie? She suffered quite a bit from your behavior and had some harsh words about you. She never mentioned respect, only contempt. I remembered Natalie's blunt remarks and couldn't help but smile wryly. That was when I interviewed Natalie. I really can't stand it. People like him make it hard for women to work. I apologized her. I'm really sorry. If I had acted sooner, you wouldn't have had to go through this. No, I'm grateful you're investigating this now. But why are you always on the side of the vulnerable, Alex? Oh, that? It's probably because of my mother. Your mother? Yeah, it might sound a bit personal, but I was raised in a single-parent household. It wasn't too uncommon, but not exactly the norm either. My mother worked incredibly hard to raise me. She was always smiling and never complained or spoke ill of others. I recalled my life with my mother. She was always busy, but we would go out together on weekends. We visited theme parks, aquariums, and zoos. I loved my mother and cherished our weekends together. But then, when I was in high school, my mother collapsed from overwork and never recovered. It was shocking. I didn't understand what had happened. After the funeral, I found her diary. It detailed how her boss and colleagues treated her harshly. I was stunned. She never showed any of that in front of me. Her diary was filled with many regrets and sad moments. But it also contained many joyful and happy memories with me. She wrote about looking forward to weekends with me and how she worked during the week to enjoy those 2 days. Weekends are just 2 days out of 7. If the other 5 days are spent in a hostile work environment, that's tough. Even if she worked with a smile, it was hard on her mentally and physically. Natalie was quietly crying. I believe the company can do more to ensure employees don't have to suffer. Unfortunately, there are always going to be unpleasant people. But having someone you can rely on, who you feel is on your side, makes a big difference. My mother didn't have that. And thinking about it still makes me cry. I almost cried for the first time in a long while. But I held back and continued talking. So, in a way, it's like I'm helping my mother. She struggled alone without support, and I wish I could have helped her. That's why I do this. By the way, Mr. Jones was the department head at my mother's company. He apologized to me, taking full responsibility and crying as he did so. Mr. Jones did that? I see. When he started this company, he told me he wanted to create a place where everyone could work comfortably. He kept in touch even after I went to college. When I graduated, I joined his company without hesitation. I remembered the look on Mr. Jones' face when he saw me at the final interview. He was quite surprised, and I smiled back at him. Since then, I've been trying to help Mr. Jones. As the company grew, it became harder to keep an eye on everything. So, I started conducting internal investigations under the guise of being on assignment. So, you're like the company's superhero. Thank you, Alex. I remembered feeling embarrassed when Natalie said that. After completing my investigation of Steve and reporting it to Mr. Jones, he offered me the position of president. I want you to run the company. You can create a better environment. At first, I hesitated, doubting my abilities, but Mike encouraged me. Mike was one of the few who knew about my background in Mr. Jones. I've always told you, someone like you should lead. Create the company you envision. I'll support you. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Mike and I shook hands firmly, and I accepted the role. No way. How could I have known? It's not my fault. I sighed at Steve's loud protest. Steve, it's true that people won't know unless you tell them. But as a manager, it's also your job to understand your position and be aware of how others feel. Why should I have to be so considerate? It wasn't like this in my time. I sighed again at Steve's lack of remorse. It seems you don't understand. Fine. We'll notify you of the consequences later. Please leave. I motioned for Steve to leave. However, he continued ranting, forcing us to call security. Why me? This is ridiculous. There was no sign of remorse in Steve's shouting. I felt a sense of exhaustion as I watched him being escorted out. I'm sorry. I should have handled it better. I shook my head at Mr. Jones' words. No. Some people just don't change. Well, it can't be helped. Let's make sure there are no more Steves in the future. Exactly. We'll definitely create a workplace where everyone can work comfortably. After that, I was formally introduced by Mr. Jones as the next president. My phone didn't stop buzzing for a while, but everyone was happy for me. In the end, Steve submitted his resignation. There's no way I'm working under a president like you. Ridiculous. He left with those parting words, but with that attitude, he'll struggle anywhere. I hope he realizes the folly of his ways someday. Hey, Alex. It's time for the meeting. After knocking on my office door, Mike walked in. Thanks. Let's go, Mike. We headed to the executive meeting. We're working hard to create a company where everyone can work comfortably. It will be challenging, but I'm not worried. I have plenty of people supporting me. Well, I see. I'm so glad you're alive. Samantha said this as she gently hugged the small child. I had taken in and raised an orphan for certain reasons. Blood relations didn't matter. I raised her as if she were my own daughter. However, there was a shocking connection between my daughter and Samantha from work. Seeing her quietly shed tears while lovingly stroking the child's head, I too had to hold back my tears. My name is Kyle Oakes. I work as an apprentice chef at a small restaurant in town. In my sophomore year of high school, it was the same restaurant where my best friend treated me to a meal for my birthday. I was so moved by the beef stew I had for the first time that I applied for a part-time job the next day. Although I was initially turned down because they weren't hiring, my enthusiasm must have come through, and I was allowed to start as a dishwasher. After graduating high school, I was hired as a full-time employee. Now, I am gradually being entrusted with cooking tasks and spend my days busily. I don't know my parents. I grew up in an orphanage from as far back as I can remember, and after graduating high school, I rented an apartment near the restaurant. Even though I didn't have parents, I never particularly felt lonely or sad. The staff at the orphanage were very kind and my friends were great. There were curious people, but I had such close friends that it didn't bother me. One of them was Tom. We grew up in the same orphanage, were the same age, and got along exceptionally well. We did everything together from a young age, attended the same schools through middle and high school, and even now as adults. We see each other often. After graduating high school, Tom worked at a car repair shop. He loved cars since childhood and was good with machines, so he found his perfect job and enjoyed his work every day. We both loved our jobs and supported each other in different fields, working hard together. Tom had a girlfriend since high school. Her name was Melissa, and she was sweet and kind. They got married after Melissa graduated from college. 2 years later, they had a lovely daughter, and they seemed to be at the peak of happiness. After Tom's daughter Christina was born, we couldn't meet as often as before, but Tom always looked happy. And I felt like I was sharing in his happiness. Christina even called me Kai after my name. Maybe she just looked forward to the cookies and cakes I brought. I never imagined that such happiness could vanish in an instant. I received the news on a rainy morning. When I turned on my phone after work, there was a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a raspy male voice spoke. "Excuse me, is this Kyle's phone?" "Yes, this is Kyle. I am Melissa's father. It seems my daughter was taken care of by you." "Oh. Melissa's father. What happened? Is something wrong?" Hearing the strained and exhausted voice of Melissa's father, I had a bad feeling and raised my voice anxiously. Melissa's father then told me in a pained voice. Melissa and Tom were in a car accident, they didn't make it. The shock was so great that I couldn't even speak. Melissa's father calmly gave me the details of the funeral, and I managed to respond before hanging up. I don't remember much after that. I informed my boss, Ryan, and got permission to take about 3 days off. Their funeral was held at a small venue since Tom had no family. They contacted me because I was close to Tom and knew Melissa and Christina. "Tom often talked about you, Kyle. He said you were very kind. He mentioned that you gave cakes for Melissa's and Christina's birthdays. And they were very happy. He always spoke proudly about you as his best friend. He wanted to bring the family to your restaurant, but now..." Melissa's father broke down, unable to hold back his sobs. I couldn't hold back my tears either, my handkerchief was already soaked. It was pitiful, but every time I saw their smiling portraits, countless memories flashed through my mind, and the tears wouldn't stop. Why did this happen? It's too soon. If I let my guard down, I felt like I might scream and cry out loud. As I struggled to hold it in, I saw Christina in the arms of an elderly woman, probably Melissa's mother. "Daddy and Mommy, why aren't they waking up?" "Sweetie, Daddy and Mommy have been called by God in heaven. They won't wake up anymore." "Why?" "No. Wake up, Daddy. Mommy." Christina's cries of no only deepened the sadness. I could hear the sound of sobbing all around the venue. Unable to bear Christina's pure grief, I cried even more. I must have cried too much, my head ached. After the funeral ended and the mourners had left, I stayed, staring at their portraits. They were hit by a car that ran a red light while crossing a pedestrian crossing. It was their first outing alone in a long time, having left their child with her grandparents. Such a tragedy struck them. Melissa's parents cherished her, especially since she was born later in their lives, and they also cared deeply for Tom. Kyle. When I turned around at the sound of my name, I saw Melissa's father. He looked exhausted, but his concern for the mourners showed his kind nature. I'm sorry. It's just hard to say goodbye. It's okay. We feel the same. With a limp, he slowly walked towards me. My wife and I can't come to terms with this. We are overwhelmed by what lies ahead. I see. Sitting on a nearby chair, he sighed and began to speak. I can't use my left side, so I can't even lift my grandchild. My wife has health issues too, so we decided to move into a nursing home. What? Then, what about Christina? We decided to place her in an orphanage. We don't have any relatives. I know it's a selfish request. But could you please visit Christina from time to time? She seems to be fond of you. Of course. But the thought of Christina going into an orphanage pained me. Having grown up in an orphanage myself, I didn't think it was a bad place. But suddenly being separated from her parents and grandparents would be incredibly lonely. And with her grandparents in a nursing home, they wouldn't be able to see her often. Is this really the best solution? Would Tom want his family to be separated like this? I want to take Christina in. The words surprised even me. But they felt natural. Tom was like a brother to me. And Christina was precious to me too. I might not seem reliable, but I genuinely care for Christina. Tom was like a brother to me, so she's like my niece. I don't want her to be lonely. Please? I asked deeply. Melissa's father looked confused, unsure of how to respond. I ended up living with Christina. She wanted it that way. However, it was decided that the adoption process would be put on hold for a while. Living with a young child was much more challenging than I had imagined. Every day, I was reminded that she was a completely different being from an adult like me. Kai. Can you tie my hair? Make it cute, okay? Christina, you're cute no matter what. Maybe we don't need to tie it? No. I want a ribbon. Even at 4 years old, she had a strong sense of girlish pride. Sometimes, she would cry her heart out and go to preschool in her pajamas if her favorite clothes were being washed. She had to bring a lunch to preschool every day. Christina had food allergies, so I had to be very careful about what she ate. Checking ingredient labels on store-bought food became a habit. It's times like these when I'm glad I'm a cook. The hardest part, though, was bedtime. At night, she seemed to remember her parents. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night and start crying. Mommy, Daddy. I would hold her, pat her back, and sing a clumsy lullaby. Even if the tune was off, hearing it seemed to comfort her. Putting her to sleep this way became our nightly routine. One morning, after many nights like this, I woke up with a headache and dizziness. Probably because I had been up late soothing Christina again. I figured it was just lack of sleep and downed a black coffee. Unfortunately, I didn't have any medicine at home. I thought I should start keeping some, just in case Christina ever got sick. With these thoughts in mind, I started my morning routine. I somehow managed to drop Christina off at preschool and headed to work, but as soon as Ryan saw me, he looked shocked. Kyle, you look terrible. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Probably just tired. Didn't you mention you're taking care of a little kid? Are you getting enough sleep? Well, it's been okay, more or less. If something's wrong, let me know, okay? Kyle? Hey! Are you alright? Ryan's deep voice started sounding distant. By the time I realized something was wrong, my vision had blacked out. When I came to, I was staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. Sitting up, I realized I was in a hospital. I must have collapsed. The clock showed it was past noon. "Oh, Kyle, you're awake?" Looking into my face was Samantha, the daughter of the restaurant owner I work for. "Let me call the nurse." I watched her press the nurse call button in a daze. With her short hair and lively demeanor, Samantha worked as the pastry chef at the restaurant. She didn't resemble her bear-like father, Ryan, but their personalities were very similar, both caring and exuberant. Despite their bold natures, Ryan crafted dishes with delicate flavors and beautiful presentation. And Samantha's intricate decorations on desserts were a hit with regular customers. "How are you feeling? Your color looks better." "I feel more refreshed than this morning." "Maybe because I slept?" "Yes, it seems you were exhausted and sleep-deprived." "I'm glad it wasn't anything serious." "You're taking care of a little one, right? Is it tough?" "Well, it's a bit challenging. She cries at night and needs attention with her meals." "I see. The restaurant's been busy lately, too. I was worried you might be overdoing it. You've been working on new recipes, too. Do you have time for that?" "I usually work on them after she goes to bed." "What time did you go to bed last night?" Close to dawn, I guess." Samantha sighed deeply in exasperation. "Listen, if you ruin your health, it won't do any good, will it? If you end up hospitalized, who will take care of her? Have you thought about that?" Samantha's words jolted me. If I collapsed, Christina would be left alone again. I took her in to prevent that, but I was about to add to her pain instead. "Kyle, my parents, and I were worried about you. Please rely on us if things get tough. Fortunately, our restaurant is family-run, so we can be flexible. We can even look after her during the day. But I can't trouble you with my problems. It's not a bother. Children have always been raised with the help of surrounding adults. Take a rest today." Her words and smile made me feel a bit lighter. At that moment, there was a knock on the hospital room door. "Kai!" Christina burst into the room. "Kai, does it hurt? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm all better now." "Good." Christina clung to me tightly, not wanting to let go. Christina was very worried. It was Ryan's wife who spoke. She had apparently picked Christina up from preschool. "Thank you for worrying about me, Christina. Kai, you're not going anywhere, right? You're not leaving?" Christina looked at me with tear-filled eyes, full of anxiety. What was I doing? Working myself to the bone only made her worry more. Samantha was right. I gently hugged Christina and slowly patted her head. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise. I'll be more careful from now on." With that, Christina hugged me even tighter. "Kyle, can I ask you something?" Samantha's tone changed to one of deep thought. She seemed troubled and serious. "What are Christina's parents' names?" Tom and Melissa." As soon as I said that, Samantha's eyes filled with tears, and she collapsed to the floor, crying. "Samantha? What's wrong?" I was at a loss, unable to do anything but worry. Christina moved away from me and went over to Samantha, patting her head. "Are you okay? If I pat you, your tears will stop." "Thank you, Christina." Samantha hugged Christina. Not knowing what to do, I looked at Ryan's wife, who gave me a troubled smile. "Mom, can I tell him?" Samantha asked her mother, who nodded quietly in agreement. Samantha wiped her tears and looked at me. "The truth is, I'm not related to my parents by blood. They took me in when I was a child. I had a younger brother. We were told we were taken in by different families, but we lost contact and I never knew where he was. His name was Tom. Christina's father." "What? Is that true?" "Yes. Christina looks just like my younger brother." I was unsure, but hearing the name confirmed it. "Yes, it's true. I'm so glad you're alive." She said this as she gently hugged Christina. Seeing her lovingly stroke Christina's head while quietly crying made me want to cry too, but I held back. "Kyle, I want to take in Christina." "What? What are you saying? I might be related to Christina by blood. I have a responsibility. No, we don't know that for sure. Even if you are, I'm Christina's guardian now. I've known her since she was born. And I promised her I wouldn't go anywhere. I'm not leaving her. Kyle. Both of you, calm down. It's still early since Christina came to Kyle's place, and changing her environment now isn't a good idea. Let's all think about what would be the best for Christina. Both Samantha and I agreed with her words. After that, I started bringing Christina to the restaurant. Before, she would stay at preschool until the very last moment, but now, from 6 p.m., she stayed at Ryan's house with his wife. She also went there on weekends when I had work, and Ryan's wife would look after her. Christina, you are such an angel. Today, I'll make you a special kids plate. Ryan was completely smitten with Christina. Despite being built like a bear, any semblance of dignity disappeared when he was around her. It wasn't just Ryan. All the senior staff were also smitten with Christina. They all tried their best to get Christina to remember their names. Although they were all acting strange, Christina was rarely lonely because someone was always nearby, and she started crying less at night. Just when Christina was getting used to everyone at the restaurant, a small incident occurred. Christina had an allergic reaction to some snacks a friend had given her. Thankfully, it wasn't severe, but seeing her mouth turn red sent chills down my spine. Christina is allergic to eggs and dairy products. This means she can't eat most store-bought sweets. While I was careful, I understood her desire to eat the same things as her friends. Why does it make me itchy when I eat it? All I could do was pat her head as she tearfully asked. Kyle, you mentioned you made cakes for Christina's birthdays. How did you do it without eggs and dairy products? After work that day, Samantha asked me. With genuine curiosity as a pastry chef. I made them at home, so it wasn't anything special. I used pancake mix and soy milk for the batter. And there's a store-bought soy whip for the cream. Kyle, that's impressive. Going to such lengths for Christina. Some of the senior staff gathered, having overheard our conversation. So, what about bread? Sometimes Christina eats bread, right? I bake that too. French bread and baguettes often don't contain dairy products or eggs, but they're too hard for her to eat. So I make it with olive oil and soy milk. I usually cook at home so the food is generally safe, but she sometimes wants to eat things like omelets. Christina's birthday is coming up, and I'm thinking about the party. Is her birthday soon? Let's have the party here then. Ryan won't say no for Christina. I was stunned by my senior's suggestion. I'll handle the cake. I'll make a big decorated one without eggs or dairy products. I'll bake the bread. Honestly, I'm better at bread making than you. So Kyle, you make Christina's favorite dish. It's the right person for the right job. The oldest senior put a hand on my shoulder. Christina wanted to eat an omelet. Could I make one without eggs? I'll also make her favorite steak. I'll try making corn soup without milk. I want to see Christina's happy face with a special menu just for her. Thinking about it made my heart race. I began working on the birthday dinner. Since Christina was being looked after, I could use the restaurant kitchen for my preparations. Samantha was helping too. Omelet is the hardest, right? It's almost all egg. That's why it's such a dream for her. I really want to make it for her. I see. That feeling is the best gift. Let's work hard together. Samantha lightly patted my back. For the omelet, I mixed pureed pumpkin with rice flour and cooked it like a crepe. The appearance resembled a thin omelet, but it was slightly dry and firm. How about adding potato? Ryan suggested as I pondered. Pureed potato could soften the texture a bit. It might be harder to cook, but that's where your skills come in. Apparently, Ryan wanted to get involved but was holding back, as Samantha informed me. Kyle, can you taste this? Samantha held out a sponge cake. Surprisingly, thick soy milk whips up quite well. I think we could make other allergy-friendly sweets. Thanks to Christina. Thanks to Christina? Yes. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have worked so hard to learn about allergies. Nor would I have thought about making sweets that could be sold at the shop. If we can sell them, not only Christina but others with allergies can enjoy them too. It's a win-win, right? I guess so? Definitely. Thanks to Christina and you, Kyle. Samantha smiled. And her smile was so bright I felt my face turn red. Finally, Christina's birthday arrived. It was a Monday, so the restaurant was closed, and we had it all to ourselves. The restaurant staff and Christina's grandparents were invited. The table was set with all of Christina's favorite foods. Not only I, but the senior chefs had also put in a lot of effort into their dishes. The steak was bound with mashed potatoes and shaped into a bear by Ryan. With a carrot bow tie and radish flowers, it was adorably intricate, and I marveled at how such delicate garnishes came from his big hands. The bread baked by my senior was fluffy and soft, easy to eat. The corn soup was carefully strained, made with soy milk, and garnished with crispy fried potato instead of croutons. The omelet was made of pumpkin and pureed potato, with a star drawn in ketchup, just the way Christina liked. Samantha's cake was beautifully decorated with lots of strawberries, Christina's favorite. Every dish was topped with love for Christina. Kai. Amazing. Can I eat all of this? Yes. Everything here is safe for you to eat. No itching. Really? Even the omelet? Yes, even that one. Yay! I'm so happy. Christina hopped around, smiling brightly. As the party wound down, Christina, full from the meal, was reading a picture book with Samantha. Seeing her delight at each page of the big pop-up book filled me with warmth. Watching them from afar, Ryan took a seat next to me. Christina is really adorable. Kids should always be smiling like that. Ryan's voice was very gentle. Despite his bear-like appearance, he was kind and gentle, especially with his wife and Samantha. After taking a sip of coffee, he began to speak quietly. You heard that Samantha isn't related to us by blood, right? We couldn't have children due to a problem on my side. We adopted Samantha because we wanted a child. She was a bit older than Christina when she came to us. Ryan's eyes narrowed nostalgically. Perhaps seeing a bit of Samantha's past in Christina. Samantha was a good girl but didn't open up to us easily. I felt a wall between us sometimes. But we had a huge fight when she was in second grade. It was over something trivial, but she ran away, and my wife and I searched the whole town for her. When we finally found her, I was truly angry. And we had a heart-to-heart talk. That's when I think she finally opened up to us. After that, we could talk openly. Though her teenage years were full of challenges. Those are good memories. Kids are treasures to their parents, whether related by blood or not. Kyle, you'll be a great parent. Come to me for advice anytime. Ryan patted my back gently. His reassuring presence felt like that of a kind father. Though I never knew my own parents, Ryan embodied what a good father should be. By the way, about Samantha's brother, we found out he went to an orphanage after being taken in by another family. When we heard that, we considered adopting him too. But he refused. This was news even Tom hadn't mentioned to me. Ryan smiled at me. Tom said he didn't want to leave his best friend there. That must be you, right? He knew about our restaurant and brought you here for your birthday. It's like he connected us. Human connections are truly mysterious. Ryan's words left me stunned. Indeed, it was Tom who treated me to a meal here on my birthday. I have no idea what thoughts he had at that time, but the bond he created brought me here, and Christina's smile is proof of that. Although invisible, Tom's legacy felt very present. Thinking about this, my eyes filled with tears. Oh. Kai is crying. What's wrong? Hey, Dad, you can't make Kyle cry. Kai, don't cry. I'm here for you. Christina awkwardly patted my head. It was the same gesture I used to comfort her when she cried. No, I just told Kyle that he and Christina already seem like family to me. That's why we were talking about it. Saying things like that only makes me cry more. Please, don't make me cry. As I said this, laughter filled the room, involving everyone around us. That night, Christina, exhausted from all the fun, fell asleep in a restaurant chair, so she stayed over at Ryan's house. While watching Christina sleep, Samantha spoke quietly. People often say I resemble my parents, so I sometimes forget I'm adopted. Over time, family members start to look alike. I'm grateful to my parents, not just for raising me, but for giving me so much love. I'm sure Christina will feel the same in the future. Kyle. It's clear how much you care about Christina. Are you trying to make me cry too, Samantha? Maybe. But it's the truth. At this rate, when Christina gets married, you'll be crying your eyes out. I can already imagine it. Yeah, I already feel like I don't want to let her go. Ha ha. Samantha laughed heartily, holding her stomach. It felt like the preparations for Christina's birthday party had brought us closer. Compared to before, I felt much more at ease around her now. Perhaps it's because she's Tom's sister. Being with her felt comforting. Kyle, remember when I said I wanted to take in Christina? I still feel that way, but my feelings have changed a bit. Samantha straightened up and looked at me directly. Her tense demeanor made me sit up straight, too. I want to be a family with you and Christina. You mean? Do I have to spell it out? I love you, Kyle. And Christina too. Samantha blushed and looked away. The sudden confession made me dizzy, but I was overjoyed. I realized I had fallen for her too. So, I gently took her hand. Thank you. I love you too, Samantha. I'll never forget the look on her face at that moment. Her smile resembled both Christina's and Tom's, making me smile as well. 20 years have passed since then. I married Samantha and took over Ryan's restaurant. Though Ryan is still going strong. He is flipping pans with vigor. Over these 20 years, we've had our share of challenges, but the warmth of family made every day blissful. However, all good things eventually come to an end. Today, Christina is getting married and leaving home. She's found a trustworthy man and decided to start a family. Her fiancé is a bright and kind person. I'm sure they'll build a happy family together. Christina brought so much happiness into my life. I'll always be grateful to her for saying, I want to live with Kai. I did my best as a guardian, but today, that role comes to an end. At the close of the wedding ceremony, it was time for the bride to read a letter of gratitude to her parents. Kai, Sammy. Just for today, let me call you by the names I used when I was little. The letter began like that, and both Samantha and I were already on the verge of tears. It's embarrassing for the father of the bride to be crying so much. Ryan, as the grandfather, was already bawling. I'm so glad I became part of Oki's family. Sammy, you always cherished me. I'm sure my real mom and dad are at peace in heaven because of you, too. Being your daughter has made me very happy. I've been happy in the past, I am now, and I will be in the future. Thank you so much. Please continue to take care of me. With love, Christina. Christina handed me the letter, smiling through her tears. Christina, thank you so much. Thank you for making me a parent. You are my pride and joy. Saying this, I gently hugged her as I used to. Beside me, Samantha nodded through her tears. The applause from the guests warmly embraced us. I heard the bride's brother only has a middle school education. It would be a disgrace for the family to be associated with such poverty. At my dear sister's wedding, as I shed tears over her beautiful appearance, wishing our late father could see her, my father-in-law suddenly began mocking me during his speech. Maybe I should prescribe some medicine for stupidity. He seemed to be trying to get laughs, but he was the only one chuckling. The troublesome person, ruining the celebratory atmosphere, continued to direct insults at me. Just as everyone started feeling uncomfortable, my sister began to laugh. My father-in-law looked at her in confusion. Then, with a stern expression, she addressed him coldly. With those words, he realized who he had insulted and regretted everything he had said. My name is Kevin Johnson. My father was a small business owner who was fairly successful, so our family of 4, including my parents and sister, lived comfortably. With financial stability, I focused heavily on my studies. Of course, I also valued my responsibilities in committees and friendships. As a result, I was seen as a top student with a good reputation. I was proud of this and worked even harder. I was always surrounded by people and never experienced any misfortune. I lived a life completely free from despair. However, my life took a drastic turn after an accident. It was winter of my second year in middle school. Just as I was about to focus seriously on preparing for high school, my father, Mike, died in a car accident. This caused my mother to become severely depressed and bedridden. Already frail and often ill, she ended up staying in the hospital for a while. Additionally, we discovered that my father had debts. The business seemed successful, but it only appeared that way. With the cost of repaying debts and covering the funeral expenses, our savings were nearly depleted by the end. After these events, I decided to forego high school. I needed to support our daily expenses, my mother's medical treatment, and my sister Emily's education. With no qualifications beyond middle school, I was hired as a waiter at a restaurant. A friend of my father, aware of our situation, offered me a job at his establishment. However, that alone wasn't enough to sustain us, so I delivered newspapers and did some home-based work in my spare time. By the time a year had passed since my middle school graduation, my mother's health had improved enough for her to handle household chores and some light work. "Mom, Kevin, I'm going to give up on high school and work too. I can't let you both carry all the burden." Emily, who was about to take her high school entrance exams, once said this. "What are you talking about, Emily? Don't worry about the house. Follow your dreams." That's right, Emily. You've always said you wanted to go to college. But both my mother and I rejected her idea. I didn't want her to give up on what I had to. Moreover, thanks to our efforts, our life was finally stabilizing. Although we couldn't call it comfortable, it wasn't bad enough to crush Emily's dreams just to help out. "We're managing fine, so you should follow your own path, Kevin." After repeating this a few times, Emily finally agreed. Another year passed. I got into high school. Happily, Emily's path after graduating from middle school has been decided. It's a nationally renowned private preparatory high school. Showing us a postcard, she proudly announced her acceptance. In the center was the word "accepted" in bold letters. And look here. This is where she pointed. It read Scholarship A. This designation was for the top 5 scorers among the applicants, covering all expenses from admission to graduation. That's amazing. Way to go, Emily. Apparently, she had studied intensely to earn this scholarship, wanting to relieve us of financial burdens. Her results showed outstanding language skills, ranking at the top nationwide. Despite our advice not to worry about the family, she did it anyway. I felt immense pride and gratitude for her efforts. Another 3 years went by. Emily continued her hard work in high school and was accepted into college. Moreover, she qualified for a grant-based scholarship. Since the campus was out of state, she would start living on her own. While I felt a twinge of sadness, I wholeheartedly celebrated her new chapter. Seeing her chase her dreams so diligently made me as happy as if it were my own success. Time flies, and it's been a little over 4 years since Emily graduated from college. By that time, life had completely stabilized. While my mother still had occasional health issues, she had mentally recovered to the state she was in before my father's passing. Emily, now a college graduate, worked in the secretary department of a major corporation. I heard she was highly regarded for her quick learning and excellent performance. Though the department had many experienced secretaries, she was thriving without falling behind. Then, unexpectedly, Emily announced she was getting married. Her fiancé was an executive at her company, the current president's son. His name was Michael, I believe. Despite being the president's son, he was a humble and sincere person. Known for his kindness and popularity, it was an honor for me as her brother that such a man chose her. I felt a father's relief that she hadn't ended up with someone unsuitable. Our families were set to meet. Unfortunately, our mother fell ill at that time. To fill in that gap, I attended on short notice. I participated in the formal meeting as a stand-in for my father. "Thank you for coming despite the bad weather." Michael's father, Mr. John Smith, began his greeting. Being the president of a major corporation, he was a commanding presence. When I inquired about his wife's absence, he unexpectedly replied, "My dear wife passed away a few years ago." I blundered. I should have asked Emily more about them. I'm terribly sorry to hear that. I didn't know. The atmosphere grew tense and awkwardly silent. During this time, the sound of the rain was the only thing that loudly raged outside. As John mentioned, today was unfortunately pouring rain. Emily is truly a remarkable young lady. John seemed quite fond of Emily, continually praising her intelligence and beauty. The college she graduated from is also impressive. Emily graduated from a nationally renowned private college, and he showered praises about that as well. It's such an honor to have someone like Emily join our company and become my son's wife. Truly, we are grateful. Thank you. While I appreciated the compliments about Emily, his persistence made me chuckle awkwardly. By the way, John's beaming face grew slightly serious as he looked directly at me. When I returned his gaze, he continued, "Which college did you graduate from?" Well, I suddenly asked about my education. I hesitated to answer as someone who only had a middle school diploma. Compared to Emily's stellar record, attending a prestigious high school and college, there was a significant gap. But there was no point in lying about my background. Dishonesty would eventually come to light. So, I decided to be honest. I didn't attend college. Due to various family circumstances, I started working after middle school. Oh. Is that so? Well. John seemed surprised and laughed awkwardly. After that, he started to ponder deeply, murmuring, Actually, my brother didn't go to high school because..." Sensing my explanation might be lacking, Emily tried to add more context. However, John interrupted her. "No need to explain further. I'm sure there are reasons you can't discuss." Though his words were polite, it was clear he looked down on me for my lack of education. He has a face closer to a smirk than a smile. Moreover, the end of his earlier words was slightly high-pitched, and a stifled laugh escaped his ha-ha. "Thank you for waiting. Here is the appetizer course." At that moment, the waitstaff brought out the first course of our meal. Both families were in full support of the marriage, so the meeting was supposed to be enjoyable. However, a single exchange caused an awkward tension. As the luxurious dishes kept coming, I found myself too distracted to enjoy the food. On the day of Emily and Michael's wedding, I was moved to tears by the combination of her beautiful makeup and stunning wedding dress. "Don't cry before me, Kevin." "Sorry." I was to walk her down the aisle in place of our late father, but at this rate, I worried about holding it together. "It's time to enter." The coordinator guided us to our positions. The doors swung open, and the loud music filled the room. Honestly, my memories from that point on are a blur. Whether it was due to intense nerves or the tears in my eyes, I couldn't see clearly. I only remember my heart being full from the emotions built up over the years. After our father passed away, Emily worked hard to minimize her educational costs, facing countless challenges. "Please take care of Emily," I whispered to Michael as I entrusted her to him. He quietly responded, "I will." With that reassurance, I wiped my eyes with a handkerchief and returned to my seat. After that, the reception proceeded smoothly, with John giving a formal closing speech. He began with, "Today, my son," and continued talking at length. He must have spoken for about 15 minutes. Just as he seemed to be wrapping up. Just as I thought it was over, another topic began. "Speaking of colleges," he glanced in my direction. "I heard that Emily's brother has only a middle school education." When he revealed my educational background, the room buzzed with murmurs. Whether they were mocking my education or disapproving of John's comment was unclear. Emily has an impressive background, but to be associated with a brother who was only a middle school graduate, well, it's quite a disgrace for the family. Still lost in my own emotions, I was almost singled out and mocked by John. Of course, I felt anger, but another emotion took precedence. Maybe I should prescribe some medicine for stupidity. John spoke into the microphone, half laughing. He seemed to be aiming for laughs, but he was the only one laughing. This troublesome man, who had dampened the joyous occasion, continued to hurl insults at me for a while. Well, that concludes my speech. Satisfied, he abruptly ended his speech and set down the microphone. Ordinarily, applause would follow, but the guests were stunned. They were, as the saying goes, pulling back in shock. Then, laughter began to break the uncomfortable silence. Everyone looked around in surprise. Emily. After a few seconds, I realized it was Emily who was laughing. John watched her with a puzzled expression. Though he didn't say it, his face clearly asked, "What's so funny?" Even as he stared, Emily kept laughing, holding her stomach. Tears formed at the corners of her eyes from laughing so hard, and I worried her makeup might get ruined. After laughing for a while, she let out a weary ah, and then looked at John with a serious expression. "John, you really should recognize your shareholders' faces." "Excuse me? Shareholders?" Michael nodded in agreement with Emily, glaring sharply at John. "Don't you remember that Kevin attended our shareholders' meeting? He's a major shareholder in our company." I hadn't known all the details about John, such as his late wife's passing. However, I didn't expect him to be unaware of who I was. At the family introduction, I thought my introduction was merely formal. But to him, it was genuinely his first time meeting me. "What? What?" John could only respond with confusion. He seemed utterly flustered. "Well then." I stood up slowly and walked toward him. "Emily's background is impressive, but what was that again?" He was too shocked to speak. He must have realized, from Emily's words, who I was and what he had just done. My father had owned a substantial amount of stock. When he passed away, I was still in the 8th grade. I was too young to manage such investments. Thus, my mother became the official heir to the stocks. However, my mother wasn't in a good mental state at that time, so the inherited stocks remained untouched for a while. By the time Emily entered college, my mother's mental health had significantly improved. She finally had the capacity to consider the inherited stocks. Upon thorough examination, we discovered that most of the companies my father had invested in had grown substantially, providing us with more than enough to escape our precarious financial situation. Thanks to this, our lives stabilized, and my job at the restaurant was sufficient to cover our needs. During this period, I became interested in stocks and started investing our surplus funds, following in my father's footsteps. Slowly, I continued to increase our holdings, eventually becoming a major shareholder in John's company. Even though it was a company mentioned in my father's notes, looking back now, I think it was a very risky approach. I was saved because this company succeeded. "I'm disappointed in you, Dad." Michael addressed John, who stood trembling in shock. "I always respected you for growing our business as the president." "Michael." John began to shake, calling Michael's name as he snapped back to reality. "But not recognizing a major shareholder's face? That's unacceptable for a president. And before that, how could you insult someone like that? Especially a family member?" John, now tearful, muttered Michael's name repeatedly. "Sorry to say this, Dad, but you're the disgrace to the family." Michael strongly reprimanded him, using John's earlier words against him. John groaned, "Ugh," then looked at me resentfully with his paled face. "Why would a middle school graduate buy our company stock?" Pointing weakly at me, he questioned. His question made no sense anymore. "Does one need a degree to buy stocks?" I replied in exasperation, causing John to blush and look down. "If you must know, my father left notes indicating which stocks to buy." "Ever heard of James Johnson?" When I mentioned my father's name, John's face turned from red to ashen. "He was in an accident." His trembling was severe. Seeing this, Michael called the staff to escort John away and declared the wedding over. There were 2 reasons I bought shares in John's company. 1, because Emily worked there. And 2, as I mentioned, it was recommended in my father's notes. Most of my father's stocks were in businesses of his associates. John's company was one of them, but I never imagined Emily would join it and marry Michael. Intrigued by this miraculous connection, I investigated further after the family meeting. I found several suspicious points. It seems my father and John were business partners. I said over the phone to Michael, sharing my findings. "Yes, I remember the name James from when I was a kid. My father died when I was in 8th grade, and since Michael is the same age as Emily, he would have been in 6th grade then." My father's schedule book notes that on the day of the accident, he had a meeting with John. Interesting, and what kind of business were James and my father involved in? Let me see. I pulled out some confidentiality agreements and other documents from my father's files and read the business details aloud. That business, Michael exclaimed, explaining that the venture was what had propelled John's company to rapid growth. From what we pieced together, it seemed that my father and John were working on a promising project, but after my father's untimely death, John continued alone and succeeded immensely. A troubling story began to take shape, but it was too early to draw conclusions. We were missing the connection between the rising action and the climax and resolution. To clarify, we need records from when my father took over James's work. I'll investigate within the company. Sure, please do. If it becomes too much to handle alone, feel free to ask Emily for help. I'll inform her as well. I see. A little time passed after the wedding. Michael visited John's room and office, who had been hospitalized due to the severe stress. With Emily's help, they thoroughly investigated and discovered records from when the business was taken over. The words are carefully chosen to sound good, but essentially, it says, the deceased's wife, who is the heir, is mentally ill. So we can do whatever we want. Using my mother's grief-stricken condition after my father's death, John forced an overwhelmingly advantageous contract. I felt a deep-seated anger, but rushing things could undermine our painstaking investigation. I urged Emily to remain calm as well. Now, we had the missing connection in the story. About a month later, John had returned, but he was far from his former self. At times he would ramble incoherently, other times he would wander out to drink heavily. It must have been painful for Michael to see him in such a state, but he approached him for the sake of the investigation. I picked up my drunk father from a bar and managed to create a one-on-one situation. Michael informed me over the phone. He confessed, with a bizarre sense of pride, that he tampered with James's car brakes. Michael's voice, on speakerphone, began to tremble. His voice cracked, and I could hear him sniffling. He also admitted to burdening James's wife with debts and taking over the business. He did it to monopolize James's business and grow his own company. Emily and I were left speechless. The cause of my father's death might not have been an accident. It could have been an intentional act orchestrated by the despicable John. Even being confronted with such a possibility, anyone who could still speak fluently would be abnormal. Facing such a grim reality, we couldn't even cry. All we heard were Michael's sobs and apologies over the phone. But since my father's death was nearly 10 years ago, there is no clear evidence that John deliberately tampered with the brakes to cause an accident. It's just something he mentioned when he was drunk. How could we hold him accountable? After much thought, I demanded his resignation as president, leveraging my position as a major shareholder. Even though he was Michael's father, his disgraceful behavior at a public event like the wedding had severely tarnished his reputation. As Michael mentioned, he had been neglecting his duties and was heavily dependent on alcohol. His credibility was already in shambles, and there was little opposition to his resignation. With Michael's support, another executive was promoted to president. After that, I focused on locating the mechanic who had worked on my father's car. Michael took a leave of absence to assist me. He repeatedly declared with strong determination, "I will settle my father's old scores." I genuinely thought he was cool. At the same time, I felt he would be a wonderful husband to whom I could confidently entrust Emily. 1 year after starting the investigation into John and my father, at such a pivotal moment, we finally succeeded in identifying the mechanic who had tampered with the brakes. He was a simple worker at a small, rural repair shop. Or rather, a former worker. Upon realizing his actions had caused a man's death, he quit his job and became a recluse. When Michael explained the situation regarding John, the former mechanic, Tom, confessed with large tears streaming down his face. At that time, the workshop was small, and I couldn't make enough to support my family. He recounted his traumatic past, his voice trembling. Then your father showed up with the blueprints. He asked me to modify the car as specified, promising a generous reward. As a mechanic, I knew the blueprints were suspicious. But I was blinded by the money. John's offered sum was staggering. I wrestled with guilt. Should I confess my crime? But I was terrified. terrified of being punished and even more of John's retaliation. I was utterly petrified. From the fear and guilt, he shut himself in his room. The wife and children he had wanted to protect left him, and he continued to live alone, barely getting by. He told us this in a voice barely above a whisper. "Would you like to go to the police with us?" I suggested to Tom, who was still trembling. Wanting to atone for his sins, he nodded vigorously, his eyes red from crying. Tom confessed to the police about the incident, no, the crime. He admitted he had been directed by John, took the money. Because of that, James left this world. All of it. Based on his testimony, John was taken in for questioning as a person of interest. After a thorough investigation into his actions and misconduct, John was officially arrested. Even though John was arrested, it wouldn't bring my father back. There was no sense of achievement, just an empty routine. One day, when I returned home, I noticed an unfamiliar luxury car parked in our driveway. Wondering what was going on, I entered the house to find Emily and Michael in the living room. My mother was serving coffee, and it seemed their visit and my return happened almost simultaneously. "I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced. Sorry for the sudden visit without any notice." "I don't mind, but what's the occasion?" "You both seem very formal." Both were dressed in formal attire for some reason. "Actually, there's something I need to discuss with you, Kevin." Michael spoke solemnly. "What my father did is unforgivable. As the son of such a despicable man, it is equally unacceptable for me to marry James's daughter. I believe we should part ways." To my surprise, Michael began to talk about breaking up with Emily, tears welling in his eyes. Judging by Emily's calm demeanor, they had already discussed this. "If you really want to break up, then you should. You're both adults and free to make your own choices." "Kevin." "But only if that's what you truly want." Michael looked at me, puzzled. "If you're saying this out of a sense of responsibility for John's actions, that's a different story." "What?" Michael's eyes widened at my words. "The responsibility for what John did lies with him. You were just a child then. You don't bear that burden. So, instead, I have a request." I asked Michael. Ignoring his confusion, I continued. "If your feelings for Emily haven't changed, could you please make her happy?" "Kevin." "You're right. My feelings haven't changed. I still want to be with Emily with all my heart." When I looked up, Michael was crying as he spoke. Emily, sitting beside him, was hiding her face in her hands, blushing. "Emily, are you okay with this?" "Yes, thank you, Kevin." Their emotions seemed to spread, making me feel a bit embarrassed too. To cover it up, we all laughed together for a while, including my mother. The sun was setting, painting the sky a deep orange. Hearing a few crows cawing, I stood before my father's grave and put my hands together in prayer. "Long time no see, Dad." I opened my eyes and began recounting everything that had happened recently. It happened last year, but Emily got married. Her husband is an executive at her company, and he's a very sincere person. The flowers I had placed swayed in the wind, as if nodding in agreement. It seemed that my father was pleased with Emily's happiness. I then briefly mentioned the man named John, who had once been my father's business partner. "But don't worry, Dad. The man who deceived you has been brought to justice. The verdict hasn't been delivered yet. But he's admitted his guilt and appears to be remorseful. What kind of punishment John will face remains unknown. Will he regret his actions? Will he apologize to my father? That's up to him, and it's something I can't predict." Tom, who tampered with the brakes, feared retribution from his employer and kept silent about his crime. Similarly, John might have been living in fear of someone's revenge. His extraordinary shock at Emily and Michael's wedding. It seemed to indicate the answer. How did he feel, standing on the ill-gotten pedestal of his position? And now, having lost his status and social credibility, what must he be feeling? I might be a bad person for hoping that he experiences the same pain my father did. But I want to live my life with integrity. I want to be a strong person who can be proud of himself and never have to feel ashamed. I told my father these wishes and left the cemetery. Honestly, a brother who can only get day labor jobs with a middle school education is nothing but a burden to us. Ha ha ha. The father of the groom, whom I met for the first time at my sister's wedding, insulted me like that during his speech. If this continues, my sister's big day will turn into a sad memory. Feeling many emotional glances directed at me, I was thinking about how to respond when. That's enough. My sister, with tears streaming down her face, suddenly stood up. I was told to keep this a secret from my brother, but the truth is, my name is Mike. I may look like any other kid, but my parents were something else. I know it's not good to talk about your parents that way, but they were really awful, and I hated them. The only reason I didn't run away from them was because of my sister. My dear sister is named Emily. I couldn't stand seeing her get hit by our parents. Maybe I also wanted to protect her as her older brother. I don't consider my parents to be real parents. Why? Because they were always fighting and never showed us any love. Sure, they gave us food, but it was only one meal a day, and on school days, we didn't even get that. There's school lunch, so there's no need to feed you at home. That was my mother's opinion. Because there was nothing to eat at home, I always made sure to eat as much as I could at school. Sometimes, when a classmate was absent, I would get permission from the teacher to take home leftover bread or desserts and secretly eat them to stave off hunger. During summer vacation, both Emily and I would lose weight and go back to school looking thinner. Our teacher, Mr. Smith, suspected that my parents were neglecting us. Thankfully, we weren't subjected to physical abuse, but the neglect we experienced is what you would call child abandonment or child neglect. Mr. Smith even came for a home visit to subtly check on our environment, but my father would say, "Mind your own business." My mother would chase him away, saying, "A mere teacher shouldn't interfere with family matters." Our neighbors seemed concerned about the abnormality of our home but hesitated to help openly, perhaps fearing the consequences. That's fine. It's natural for everyone to prioritize their own safety and protect their families. It's only natural to think that getting involved in facing the fallout isn't worth it. So, I decided to prioritize protecting Emily above all else. When we were both suffering from the lack of attention and nutrition from our parents, an incident occurred at our house. While we were at school, our parents got into a huge fight that ended up involving the police. They threw things at each other, broke windows, and screamed at the top of their lungs, prompting the neighbors to call the police. Their fight was so intense that the responding officers had to physically restrain them. My father was injured by shards from a broken vase. And my mother was beaten so badly her face was swollen. After receiving treatment at the hospital, both were charged with assault and taken into custody. During their questioning, our neglect also came to light. At first, there was talk of sending us to a foster care facility since we were minors, but our distant relatives, the Johns, stepped up and offered to take us in. It was Tom who came to pick us up, and we had always affectionately called him Uncle Tommy even before then. We had to transfer to a new school, but since Uncle Tommy and his wife, Natalie, were always kind to us, we accepted their offer without hesitation. Tom and Natalie ran a small handyman business. I continued my education up to middle school while observing their work. During summer breaks, I would help with the business. The smiles and gratitude from the neighbors showed me the joy of the handyman work. So, when it came time to decide on my future in my third year of middle school, I chose to join the handyman business without hesitation. Tom and Natalie told me, "You can go to college if you want," but I turned down their offer. They weren't wealthy, yet they took us in. I didn't want to be a further burden. I wanted to earn the money for Emily's education myself. By taking on the heavy and demanding tasks, I wanted to contribute to the handyman business and repay the couple for their kindness. So I have no regrets about my choice. Emily also took the initiative to help with housework and grew into a well-liked young woman in the neighborhood. With Emily handling the household chores, the couple and I could focus on work, and the handyman business thrived. However, just before Emily graduated high school, another incident occurred. That day, I had taken the day off to buy a gift to celebrate Emily's acceptance into college and was at the department store. The incident was that Tom and Natalie got into an accident while out on a job. The only consolation was that they died instantly without suffering. With the help of our relatives, we managed to hold the funeral, but we lost our last dependable guardians and were left on our own again. Although it was lonely, we couldn't afford to stop moving forward. According to their will, I inherited the handyman business. I'll quit college and help you, Mike. Don't be silly. You worked so hard to get into college, so go and study. But you need to study hard, get a good job, and be happy. Mike. I managed to convince Emily, who was ready to give up college, to stick to the original plan and send her off. I didn't want Emily to suffer, and I wasn't going to change my mind about that. Her college was out of state, and she was moving into a dorm in the fall. We stayed in touch regularly after she started college, updating each other on our lives. Emily graduated on time and got a job at the company she wanted. She steadily built her career, and after about 3 years, she told me she was getting married to the man she had been dating. Congratulations, Emily. Thanks, Mike. I could tell from her excited voice over the phone that she was genuinely happy. It's all thanks to you that I got to go to college. It's your hard work that paid off. It's hard to believe little Emily is getting married. I'm so proud. Hey, stop talking like that. When I mention something from my childhood, Emily reacts. I secretly smile, imagining her face turning red with anger. Emily I had always protected was getting married. I had always wished for her happiness. Despite being born to such toxic parents, she grew up to be a kind person. I wanted her to be the happiest person in the world. Hey, Mike, I have a favor to ask. I'll do anything for my sweet sister. We're having the wedding in the next county. Will you come? The wedding? Of course, I wanted to attend my dear sister's big day, but I only had a middle school education. I was concerned that if someone at the wedding cared about such things, it might make Emily feel uncomfortable in her new life. Some might think it's outdated, but there are still people who care about one's highest level of education. If they equate someone with only a middle school education with poverty or stupidity, they might think the same of Emily. Of course, there are other reasons as well. Please, I want you to see me in my wedding dress. All right. I couldn't refuse my dear sister's cute request, so I agreed. Just, please, no speech for me. I don't want to stand out. Oh, yes, that might be best. Sorry. But I am truly happy for your happiness. I know, thank you. Understanding my feelings, Emily accepted my request without saying much. Relieved, I eagerly looked forward to the days leading up to her wedding. On Emily's wedding day, I dressed sharply and headed to the venue. Emily greeted me happily and introduced me to her in-laws. Are you Emily's brother? I'm Tom, nice to meet you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Nice to meet you too. Your name is Tom? It's the same as someone who helped us a lot. It feels like fate. Haha, I guess you two are really siblings. Emily said the same thing when we first met. Come on. That's what started our relationship. Emily cheerfully explained how they met. I was reassured to see that Tom seemed to genuinely care for her. Tom helps his father, the company president, and works very hard. It reminded me of you, Mike. I can see how much Emily cares for you. I'm envious because I don't have any siblings. Is that so? I felt confident that Tom would make Emily happy, so I shook his hand firmly. Please take care of Emily. She's the sister I've always protected and cherished. Tom, receiving my sentiment, nodded yes with a serious expression. Yes. I promise. His strong words reassured me, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. So, I found out that Tom is a serious and kind person. Next, it was time to meet Tom's parents. I wondered what kind of people they would be as we headed for the introductions. This is my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law is over there talking to a guest. John, this is my brother. Nice to meet you, I'm Mike, Emily's brother. I'm John, Tom's father. His haughty demeanor matched that of a company president. Emily had explained that John was an old-fashioned man who had built his company from the ground up. I could understand why he couldn't afford to be lenient. So, what kind of work do you do? What's your highest level of education? I had expected this question, so I wasn't surprised, though the directness was a bit much. Emily looked worried, but I smiled and answered calmly. I run a handyman business. My highest level of education is middle school. What? I have no regrets about my life choices. I take pride in my work as a handyman. There is nothing to be ashamed of. A handyman? Isn't that just day labor? When he said that with a completely exasperated look, I thought, oh, he's the type who cares about academic background. The ceremony felt more like a party hosted by the groom's family than a wedding. There were several moments clearly designed to flatter John, causing many guests to smile wryly. After the costume change, it was time for John's speech. Tom is truly exceptional, and I am confident he will continue to grow the company after me. The bride, Emily, is also wonderful. And I trust she will support him well. John might be a bit tipsy. His speech was fluent, but his eyes were slightly red. Still, I was genuinely happy that he acknowledged Emily. Feeling a surge of pride, I quickly dabbed my eyes with a handkerchief to catch the tears. But I do have concerns. Specifically, about Emily's brother. John's tone grew sharper, and I looked up. Mike only has a middle school education. That alone is an issue, but his profession is even more troubling. Oh no. The room started to stir at John's words. In today's society, it's problematic enough that the future brother-in-law of a company president is a mere handyman. Don't you all agree? His disdainful tone made it clear he was belittling me. It's one thing if he genuinely believed that. But it's another to announce it at such a joyous occasion. Was he truly here to celebrate Tom and Emily's wedding? Honestly, a brother who can only get day labor jobs with a middle school education is nothing but a burden to us. Everyone knew I was sitting at the bride's family table. I felt various emotions from the glances directed at me and wondered how to handle the situation. If this continued, Emily's special day would turn into a sad memory. That's enough. Just as I was contemplating my next move, Emily's shout cut through the tension. The sound of a chair falling echoed as Tom, John, and all the guests turned their attention to Emily. I thought it was terrible when I introduced Mike, but this is too much. What part of him is a burden? You don't know anything about him. Emily? Tom seemed just as shocked by Emily's outburst. You think it's a problem because Mike only has a middle school education? What's so bad about that? Do you think everyone in the world can attend high school without any worries? That's not how it is. Yes, we were poor. So what? Emily's eyes filled with tears as she poured out her emotions. She must have been holding back for a long time. She wouldn't stop until she had expressed everything. Our parents neglected us. We only got one meal a day, and on school days, nothing at all. Mike and I were so skinny that our neighbors worried about us. But we could still smile because he protected me. He's the kindest brother ever. Emily. Hearing Emily's heartfelt words, I felt my own tears welling up. Mike gave up his own education to work so he could send me to high school and college. Can you understand that, John? That sometimes people have to work instead of going to school, not for themselves, but for their family? Ugh. John grunted under the force of Emily's words. His complexion grew pale. After our relatives who took us in died in a tragic accident, Mike took over the handyman business. John. You might think being a handyman is just day labor, but Mike brings happiness to many people with his work. I respect and am proud of him more than anyone. So when someone insults him, Emily, I understand. You love Mike very much, don't you? Yes. Tom gently hugged Emily, who was overwhelmed with emotion, comforting her. That used to be my role, but I now knew for sure that I could trust Tom with it. As I dabbed my tears with my handkerchief, a ripple of applause started from one corner of the room and quickly spread, engulfing the entire venue in a wave of emotion. Emily's revelation had turned the guests into our allies. Mike, may I say it? Emily sought my confirmation, but I had a feeling she wouldn't stop even if I said no. Actually, Mike told me to keep this a secret, but I think now is the time to reveal it. Mike has been working on something else on the side. Some of you might know him. Knowing what was coming, I smiled wryly. He is the masked live streamer handyman. Right after Emily's announcement, gasps of what echoed around the room. My secret side job, which has become quite popular lately, is live streaming life consultations. Thanks to this, I have the largest audience in the US for life consultations. Since it's all voice-based, anyone who has used my service would instantly recognize me if I spoke. That's why I had promised not to give a speech. I was worried that if my side job was revealed, it would draw too much attention to me and ruin Emily's wedding. But now, there was nothing I could do about it. Resigned, I glanced at Emily, who seemed pleased to see the attention shift to me. While Emily seemed satisfied, the guests flocked around me, throwing the wedding into chaos. The MC, looking troubled, announced that the wedding would be temporarily halted and rescheduled with just close family members later. And the gathering dispersed. After the crowd around me finally cleared, I headed to the family waiting room, feeling awkward. The first thing I saw was John being scolded by a woman in an elegant dress, who I assumed was Tom's mother. John was kneeling on the floor, receiving a one-sided reprimand. I hesitated to interrupt. Excuse me. Oh, dear, I apologize for showing you such an unpleasant scene. The woman approached me with a smile and apologized politely. Nice to meet you. I am Michelle, Tom's mother. Nice to meet you. I'm Mike, Emily's brother. I'm sorry for ruining the wedding. What are you talking about? It was all his fault for speaking so poorly of you. If Emily hadn't spoken up, I would have slapped him myself. Michelle's strong words made me flinch. Besides, I am a fan of Handyman, the live streamer. Your work is truly amazing. I was just explaining your contributions and impact to him. Thank you. It's really a shame he didn't realize it even after speaking to you before the ceremony. I was happy that Michelle was a fan, but I couldn't help thinking that it wasn't John's fault for not knowing about Handyman. May I say something? Yes? I want to apologize and make amends with Mike. In that case, go ahead. But if you say anything disrespectful again, you know what will happen. Of course. With Michelle's permission, John stood before me. His knees were slightly shaking, probably from kneeling on the floor. I'm sorry for earlier. Even though I didn't know what you do, it was inappropriate to say those things in front of everyone. He apologized deeply. Emily also told me about how much you've sacrificed and worked hard. I couldn't do what you did. I respect you for that. I am proud to have you as part of our family. Please, forgive my foolishness? Yes. I look forward to being family with you. I shook his outstretched hand, and we reconciled. Later, in a peaceful atmosphere, we held another wedding ceremony for the bride and groom, which went off without a hitch. Since then, John not only doted on Emily like his own daughter but also took a liking to me. Recently, he even introduced me to a woman from his company. He recommended me highly for my character and work ethic, leading to a relationship that blossomed into love. I, who had never had time for romance due to work and taking care of Emily, experienced love for the first time. We continued our relationship smoothly, and this fall, we will be getting married. When I told Emily, she cried tears of joy. Despite our awful parents, Emily and I have both found happiness. I hope to continue creating opportunities for our family to gather and make our happiness even greater.